Throughout this series, we've seen that building your own house is something of a leap in the dark. And this week's couple are facing more unknowns than anyone else because they're intending to build their house out of straw. And where else except here in the trendy London borough of Islington? This might seem a very built-up and fashionable place to be building a brand new house, let alone a straw house. But this week's couple were lucky enough to find a site in one of London's most sought-after areas. The site faces a busy intercity railway line and is next to a conservation area. It's a brownfield site with some old buildings on it which were used for light industry. After scouring auction catalogues for years, Jeremy Till and Sarah Wigglesworth bought this for £75,000. They're both architects, but this is the first private house they'll have built from scratch. So tell me about this place. What was it?
It was an old forge which made leaf springs. So it was a big...
Leaf springs, they're used on Land Rovers and military vehicles.
Yeah, that's right.
The railway, yeah.
Oh, right, yeah. Big old leaf springs.
Yeah. So it was a big oven in the centre here.
Okay.
Burned them up and went out the chimney there.
Right, I mean, it's blackened, isn't it? I mean, it's a filthy place.
Yeah, and this is how we found it.
It's a year since the tenants moved out of here.
And, so you bought it with tenants here?
Yes, It was a fully operational forge when we bought it.
How long have you been industrialists? How long have you owned it for?
Landowners. Owned it for about 4 years now. Yeah.
All right, so you had sitting tenants for 3 years?
We did.
It was also just slightly our naivety because we bought it at auction and we didn't kind of do our homework properly.
So you didn't realise that?
Well, we did. We realised there were people on it, but we hadn't kind of followed through the implications. And we did it really quickly. I think we saw it about a week before the auction. Did really sort of cursory examinations and didn't think we had a hope of getting it.
We think that many people didn't spot its potential. I mean, most of these buildings, I mean, the rain's coming in, the buddleia is growing out of the ceiling, there are holes everywhere, and so we just took the view that we were going to get rid of the whole lot and start all over again.
But it is a kind of common reaction when we bring people down here. They say, how could you possibly see a new house on here?
The new building is designed in 3 sections. There'll be a raised office block at one end. Sloping down from this is a living area with a great glass wall, and at the bottom end is the bedroom wing. Jeremy and Sarah plan to use unconventional materials everywhere. The walls of the bedroom wing will be made of straw bales. These will also run along the back wall of the living area up towards the office. The waterproof covering for the straw will be transparent, so you'll see the bales from the outside. On the sloping roof, they plan to grow strawberries, and there'll be a 5-storey library tower with a room at the top for train spotting. The office block will be raised off the ground and sit on 10-foot-high Gabion walls. The wall facing the railway will be clad using blue sandbags. There are no plans for the interior, but by the spring they hope to have the exterior shell completed, so we'll be able to see if this avant-garde building can actually be made. Are these sample building materials or are these chairs?
They're both. They have a number of different uses.
Yeah? Actually, they're rather comfortable as chairs, but I have to say, you know, I mean, on the way here I was thinking about straw, and it's not the obvious choice for a building, is it? Particularly an urban building. So what are its...
Well, it isn't obvious because it hasn't really been used before as a building material very much in this country.
Yeah, but things like, insects and rat invasions and, all those things that, one thinks could go wrong with it. I mean,
we like living with other animals.
Pets in the wall.
There's something very obvious about them. They're kind of very direct because you kind of just, that's that. You pick it up.
Big bricks.
And it's like kind of big brick.
It can't take very long to build a house.
No,
to build a wall
very fast.
It's so wide, and you could sort of stack. I mean, it's like building, like stacking them in a granary or a barn.
Exactly.
You can quickly build.
That's the other thing we actually quite like about them is that because they haven't really been used before, there isn't really a well-developed technological solution to building in bales. So it's an incredibly inventive way of
Can you put that into
building a wall.
English, please? Does that mean that nobody knows how to do it?
Nobody knows quite how to do it, in other words, And everyone's still inventing different processes. So it's, a vehicle for lots of invention.
Very exciting.
It is.
Jeremy and Sarah live in Islington, near their site, in a house they bought 12 years ago and refurbished, putting in a loft conversion for their office. They're selling this house and will also be getting a mortgage to raise a total of £400,000 to spend on their build. Jeremy is head of architecture at Sheffield University. Sarah teaches part-time and runs their architectural practice. For some time, they've been telling audiences around the world about their avant-garde project, like this lecture at London's contemporary arts venue, the ICA.
The first visit to the site kicks in on the adrenaline. At £1,000 a day, it's an expensive habit. But what other drug can deliver such a heady mixture of fear and exhilaration?
They've caused quite a stir in architecture circles already. People pay to hear them talk about their project, which has already been described as an icon of our time, before it's even built. But talking is one thing, doing is another.
Actually, it's the first new building I have ever built. Mainly up till now, it's been, refurbishments, renovations, working with existing buildings.
It's like a kind of first novel or something. The first novel is normally about the person's, life. It's kind of semi-autobiographical. And they put in almost everything they know into the first novel. And it's a kind of thing like that with the first building often. And that is seen as a sort of closet criticism, whereas I think it's fantastic, I have no shame that it's got so much going on in it.
It's an exciting beginning for Jeremy and Sarah. For others, it's the end of an era. Chris took over from his father, who started the forge back in 1947. The land was leased from British Rail for a nominal amount, but the business couldn't afford to buy it when it came up for sale. Chris is coming to say goodbye to a lifetime of memories.
This whole yard from the turn of the century has been a working yard. London's lost too many little working yards like this. It was a glass-blowing factory before us that got burnt down between the wars. It was a stables before that. People used to bring their carriages in here and park them up for the gentry. Heavy horses for the meat market were kept here. This was a working yard. I see desolation, all the happy times, even as a boy when my dad brought me here. Walking down this yard, all the men I knew, and still know two of them. It was a very happy yard. It's now desolate, overgrown. To just be where two people might live doesn't really mean much. You might as well be in Centre Point.
Demolition gets underway in October. It's taken 3 months to get started. Part of the time has been spent agreeing safety measures with rail track. But putting a price on the job has been the main cause for delay.
The budget that we set ourselves in the first instance was £400,000. When it was initially costed, it came in at twice that. So that was a scary moment.
And then we made a whole series of cuts. We rationalised the building, we cut stuff out, there's no front door, things like that. But we kind of got it down to where we thought it should be. That has gone up by about 10 to 15%.
With figures veering alarmingly in the regions around £500,000, it's still impossible to price this job. But Jeremy and Sarah are now committed to the project. There's no turning back.
My nightmare is steelwork sticking out of the ground, rusting and decaying without any cladding or anything. It's just standing there as this beacon of failed hope for the next, 20 years or something, whilst we struggle, to live in an incomplete house next door.
It's classic. There are houses all dotted around England of these kind of failed dreams. And to finance it, we have to sell this place so that we wouldn't have anywhere to live. So that's the kind of nightmare.
I think I just feel you only live once, and, to hell with it. We've got some money, and we've lived with this thing now for 3 years, I suppose, since it was designed, nurturing it through a whole series of processes. During that time, it's like you get to know this thing really, really well. You've walked through its spaces time and again. You've imagined your life living in there, and it just becomes a part of you. In a way, I don't really care what the outcome is. I just want to build it.
It's Jeremy's first look at his cleared site.
It's amazing because you can never quite imagine what the site's going to be like when it's empty. I mean, you can project your imagination as much as you can, but it also shows how much money we could make out of it if we, rather than kind of going into debtor's bank, you could just fill this whole thing up with nasty little noddy houses. Eventually, the house would be going right down to the end, and it's when I stand here and see that I see how big the house is.
Jeremy and Sarah's site is right on the edge of a conservation area. Amazingly, their design sailed right through planning. This is partly because none of the neighbours raised any objection. I guess they were delighted to have anything on their site instead of that dirty old forge. But just as importantly, the planning department, who are composed of civil servants, used their delegated powers to pass the design without referring it to the planning committee, who are all elected councillors. It strikes me that delegated powers short-circuit the democratic process, but they also hand back the decision-making to dedicated professional planners. So what's their policy in a case like this? You've got a great number of ancient buildings in this borough. I mean, what's your approach to the siting and the building of very contemporary buildings against conservation?
Well, about half the borough is conservation area. So we are in a privileged position in the historic sense. And when we do engage in conservation, we engage in real conservation. But that in turn enables us to draw the line between the past and the future, if you like, and encourage modern design. It's quite nice to be reminded occasionally that we no longer live in Dickensian London. And it is important to be reminded that we live in the 20th century.
Railtrack have insisted on a scaffold fence that's 10 metres high and fully clad to protect passing trains during the build. The whole building has also had to be redesigned a safe distance from the tracks. With the foundations, there are the usual problems with a brownfield site. Old pipelines under the ground need filling up with extra concrete, which means extra time and money. The first experiment is the Gabion walls, and it's the first place that theory doesn't match reality. Gabions are made up of recycled rubble held in wire mesh cages. The cages come pre-cut in flat packs, which just need clipping together. Gabions are normally used on motorway cuttings. Jeremy and Sarah want them to act like stilts that the office block will sit on top of. They can easily take the weight of the building by themselves, but engineers have pointed out a flaw in the idea. If there's a fire, the thin wires will quickly melt, so the walls will collapse. It's a bit of a cheat, but reinforced concrete pillars now have to be hidden in the middle of each Gabion. Still, the Gabion should look nice, and it's only 120 quid for a lorry load of rubble. All the colours in the...
Jesus, this is
fantastic
heavy.
stuff. And this is literally just bits of building crushed up.
Hey!
So this is a different colour, this early lot.
This has got more of the lapis lazuli in it.
Lapis lazuli.
We're going to have to hand pick those.
Why's that?
Because we're still aesthetic enough that we don't want it.
They're not...
It's meant to be crude, but we have our kind of bottom
why
line.
Don't they make a blue Gabion and a red one and a yellow one and a grey one.
No, we should.
Yeah.
What? This one's yellow, isn't it?
There's a good deal of yellow over there. Or rather like those sand sculptures, you know, that you buy at the beach. You could layer them.
layer it.
Your strata of.
That'd be quite nice too.
I don't charge much.
I wonder.
Original ideas are all very well, but I wondered how Jeremy and Sarah, as practicing architects, explained their vision to others.
Kevin, is that
How do you explain this to me as a client?
you point to something really tangible like that, and you say, see that, that's where your toilet's going to go. And then you start talking about what type of toilet you want. And you kind of ignore
Having
all the
said
mess.
that, it is very difficult to tell at this stage what it is you're looking at with these piles of mud.
Are you confident the toilet's going there?
What?
Are you confident the toilet is
It
going there?
has to. That's one of the really funny things about houses, is that you have to get... Well, it's not funny, but the drainage goes in first, and the drainage setting out is absolutely critical.
Determines where everything else
Determines
goes.
where everything
Jeremy, I
goes.
have to tell you, that's not the toilet, that's the sink.
No, because we're having a composting toilet, so yeah. But I was just using it as an example. Yeah, the composting toilet goes there.
Fine. And how are you getting on with the trains?
Well, we like them.
They've become your friends.
We think they're lovely.
I think they're going to look fantastic when the building's up and you get this sort of thing with the Gabions going like that.
Yes.
And the trains going past, sort of framed.
Yes.
Maybe that's a strange aesthetic.
No,
but
I
it's one
think
that quite like.
it's like a picture frame.
This site has quite a lot of vibration, but obviously it's worse at the railway line side, and it gets better as you go back across the length of the site. So the solution to that is to put the building basically on springs to isolate it from the surrounding ground.
Well, we haven't seen them, but they look, in the catalogue, they literally just look like springs.
Tractor spring.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're large.
So what we're going to see is you're going to see these great Gabions with these concrete plinths at the top, and then these collection of
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
curly woody springs.
They're
Are
about
they-
that big.
It's
Is it
sit
going to work,
between
or is
two
the building
metal
literally just going to
plates.
bounce off? I mean, is it?
No, it's
Is
just
there a danger of that?
it's
Well,
held
the
just
building's
by
so
dead weight.
heavy, they can't go anywhere.
In a way, we're not being as sort of experimental as we like to be, because we're held back by money. It would actually be quite nice to say, okay, well, we've got a rough idea how the house is going to be, and to begin to invent more on the site. But the trouble with that is that you're kind of always constrained by money. You don't quite know in your invention whether you're going to go miles and miles over budget.
When I first met Jeremy and Sarah, I thought to myself, here is a pair of real architects. You know, all that ICA stuff and all those academic treatises meant that here was a house that was going to be built out of ideas rather than out of passion. But now I think, you know, not only are in fact they're remarkably good communicators, but they're not detached from this project. They're remarkably committed to it. And they're taking all the risks. I mean, you know, personally, financially, academically, professionally, they are putting everything on the line. Experiments in architecture are a noble idea, but the stakes are high. Jeremy and Sarah have sold their house to pay for all of this, and they've moved into temporary accommodation. But this build is going at a snail's pace. Making it up as you go along is all very well in the ivory towers of academia, but on a building site like this, you've actually got to make it, and with some reference to the schedule. It's early February, and not a lot has changed since Christmas. The steel, which was due here in November to construct the main framework of the building, is still being designed. Only a tiny team keeps the project from stopping completely. Jeremy and Sarah are using their straw bales as part of an extremely complicated design. But I always thought the whole point about straw bales is that they're quick, they're easy, they're cheap, and they're also environmentally friendly. So while they're battling with their avant-garde designs, trying to put them in practice, I thought I might have a go myself at trying to build a straw bale structure here at home in Somerset. Only this time it's going to be a little bit more modest. I've got a small manufacturing business here in Somerset, designing and making lighting. Our workshops and offices fit nicely in the outbuildings around the farmhouse. But I have to work in a corridor. The plan is to make a small extension to our old piggeries next to a stream and with views across the fields to the west. It'll have 2 stone walls and 2 straw bale walls and a bridge across the stream. On the field side, the roof will be turfed with tiles behind as a continuation of the piggeries roof. So I send my application to the local planners and wait to see if I get permission. Back in Islington, Jeremy and Sarah have decided to put up the bedroom wing as a separate building. The foundations are in, so who knows, something might actually go up on this site.
It's going to be a detached house from the rest of the job. And they're going to be living in here as we're building the rest of the job. So the client will be close at hand, you know what I mean? If we've got any problems, we'll go and knock on Jeremy's door and say, "Oi, what's this bit here?"
This part of the building will be timber framed and the size of a small townhouse. But as its walls will be made of straw, it's not simple to design or to build.
We're being caught out by the fact that it hasn't all been designed before we start. I think at the moment I'd say that I'm finding the lack of structure actually quite difficult to deal with.
We're putting down concrete blocks on the foundations to support the timber stud walls. We started the job yesterday and it was going to be done in shuttering and concrete like the rest of the foundation, but I got a message this morning at 7 o'clock saying, you know, that this has got to be done in the blocks now, so I've got to rectify the work I did yesterday.
I mean, it's very, very much a series of sort of shifting targets right now. And although that sounds all sort of lovely and experimental at the beginning, when you get there, it's a bit of a nightmare, really.
After the odd false start, the structure goes up quite quickly. It's the only part of the building that doesn't have any steelwork, which still hasn't even been ordered yet. The wooden trusses and the foundations that support them are both designed according to the dimensions of the straw bales. Jeremy and Sarah are now in the thick of putting their ideas into practice. Making it up as they go along means they have to race to solve problems to avoid holding the build up. With a design like theirs, that's an uphill struggle.
We are really, really up against it. I mean, we're already desperately behind. We're so behind on so many items. We can't possibly make it up. A lot of the problems we're having at the moment are due to the fact that it is nothing square and, you know, everything's an odd dimension and curved and, you know, on the slope and God knows what else.
There are bits in here which I've got no regrets. I'm really happy they're there, but they are desperately overcomplicated. And a bit of simplification along the way might have been easier on our health and wallets.
The bedroom wing is designed to have 2 bedrooms, a dressing room, utility room and bathroom. It'll be adapted to house Jeremy and Sarah until the rest is built. That's if it's built this century.
So, is it all on schedule? Have you got it all mapped out, everything, on your little list of things to tick off?
I haven't actually got a schedule. I haven't got a programme or anything at the moment. I'm just doing everything as quick as I can.
You must have a deadline in your own mind about when it's due to be finished.
Yeah, millennium. It'll be finished millennium time.
So if you were building a conventionally designed house for a client... Right?
Yeah, if I've priced it, I'm on a schedule.
Right,
my own schedule.
Yeah. It's a different thing altogether.
It is a slightly different,
And
yeah.
you can bring a house in at a sort of costed
That's right.
amount per square foot.
I could give a price for the whole job.
Yeah,
But
with
this
it's
I
kind
couldn't,
of
no.
open-ended, isn't
That's
it?
right. That's
And
right.
that must mean, surely, because of that, and because of the fact that it is a much more relaxed build, as it were, in terms of the sort of the timing and everything, does that mean you end up working less efficiently, less, you know, there's less kind of drive there?
It might appear to be relaxed to you, but you can come in here any hour of the day and everyone's busy. They're always busy.
I'm back this afternoon.
Well, we've finished work now.
It's only 1 o'clock.
Get lost, it's bloody 3 o'clock.
Oh, it is.
It's March, and after 3 months, they're still making the Gabion walls. Experimental building takes time, and after all this time, Jeremy still hasn't shown the builders what they're making.
Steve, have you guys seen this? Seen the model? Do you want to see it? It's quite different. You've seen it, haven't you, Steve?
No. I see. Is that the front gate?
Well, that's all gone.
I thought it was the other way round. Hold on.
Come on. Taking the piss.
Is that what we're doing?
Huh?
That's what we're building now.
Right.
That's the Gabions. This sits on the Gabions.
So that's the railway, that's the house. These are Gabions, thin Gabions. This is a sandbag wall.
Sandbags.
Yeah, sandbags. And then this is all clad in fabric. Kind of padded fabric. You heard about them?
No.
No, we have now.
In sections, one giant coloured sections? Or?
No, it comes like a bandage.
I see.
So it will wrap around the whole building. There's going to be a really...
What's the idea of the sandbags? Take out some of the noise?
Yeah. Right. So I think that one of the problems is when the neighbours see how tall it is.
It's all right, money look and that.
You
Do you want to
carry
see
on.
it?
You carry on.
Do you want to come see the model?
We'll see it all when it's done anyway. We saw it before this all started.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it was a real mess. Oh, it looks nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'd be lovely. As long as nobody comes in and pinches the strawberries.
Bales or the
Strawberries.
No, because we've got strawberries on the roof as well.
Yeah.
Everybody knows more than we do.
And when it's all done, I'll come in and have a look at it then.
Yeah.
I'll go home. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Yeah.
In Somerset, things are moving on with my straw bale project. It's my first moment of truth.
It's been about 6 weeks since I put my planning application in, and the head of planning is coming to see me this morning because he's got a couple of queries. Now, I'm a bit apprehensive because the only house I've ever designed and built is this one, which is on something of a different scale. However, I think I put in a reasonable application.
I've already discussed possible different sites with the planners and learnt that the plans are more likely to get approval if I extend into the farmyard than into the field. But what about the materials?
Do you have a problem with the use of straw bales to build two of the walls out of?
Not at all. Some people might think it's a sort of weird and wacky kind of material, but we've got no problem with it. It's a perfectly traditional kind of material, and indeed it fits in with the ideas of sustainable development. It's locally sourced material, and it's useful to get people thinking about how they can actually take advantage of local materials when building.
A few weeks later, we get started on the foundations and the stone wall. We've dug the stones up from the field, and we're using a traditional lime mortar.
I don't think we're going to be able to come across.
The foundation pads will support a timber frame. It's done in 2 weeks with a concrete lintel in place. Good news from Islington. It's late March and Jeremy and Sarah's steel frame is finally being fabricated. With Jeremy away teaching in Sheffield, another member of the practice, Gillian Horn, is brought in as the job architect. She'll share the workload and allow Jeremy and Sarah to take more of a client's role. A complicated and large steel frame poses enough problems at the best of times. This one has to sit on springs. It's no wonder there's been such a delay.
Caused a problem for me in the actual buildability of the structure.
The springs supporting the office will go on top of the Gabion walls. The rest of the springs will be on the ground, with steel columns balanced on top of them. Well, that's the theory, anyway.
I really want to see them. I mean, I'm expecting them to look like car springs or like tractor springs.
At a certain point, the office springs, which is actually this big lump here, which doesn't look like a spring at all, at a certain stage it was going to be exposed, and inside there is a big, massive coil of metal spring. Don't try and lift it, you will not get anywhere.
Goodness, they are heavy.
So these are for the office, and there's 8 of these, one on each main Gabion piece.
Right, I can understand that. And these are
Careful,
for
you
where?
have to keep it upright.
Right, this is going where?
This one is a tower spring.
Right. This I can lift.
Yeah. They're all
Right.
designed, you see, for the relative loading.
Right.
They've all been
okay.
calculated, and so that
What's that,
depending on the loading
does that bounce up and
taken on
down?
It
It
shouldn't
does?
exactly. Well,
Oh, I see,
as the
right.
load of the building goes on, they'll gradually go down, and then they'll reach their optimum level.
Right. Yeah. But
As
look
you
at
can
this.
see in this one.
That's tiny. That's tiny. I mean, that's so easy
Yeah.
for a pillar just to shift and.
What they have, you see, is that we've had them designed for this
Yeah.
particular situation, because
Right.
the more tricky one is actually the house springs, where you have a column coming down, sitting just on a spring. So what we've had done is
straight
we've had these plates manufactured with a hole in the
Right.
top, and so that you'll have a locating lug in there.
Stonehenge technology, isn't it? You know, kind of bringing two great lumps together and this little
Yeah.
locating pin just
Yeah, just to
sits
keep
on
them in
that.
place.
That's quite
And the
something,
engineers are
isn't it?
happy with that.
Well, this roof looks reassuringly finished. It's rather nice. Trouble is, it's built on sticks which are open underneath, and there is a noticeable absence of building on the rest of the site. They keep telling me it's going to be ready for the millennium. The thing I wonder is whether they mean the whole build or just the dome. Well, it's April and the stone gabions are ready to take the building up. Here and over there, the timber frame is finally ready for the next momentous phase of building, because today, after 5 years of planning, the straw bales are arriving.
The bales fit tightly between the vertical trusses and are secured to the timber frame with metal strips. This is a method invented by Jeremy and Sarah. Some of their students have volunteered to help. One of them sees a problem with the metal strip system.
What, so you think that you're going to get condensation happening on here?
Yeah. And then you'll get moisture forming in the straw.
And rotting the straw.
And rotting the straw. You could get.
I think that's
I mean,
a
I
good point,
don't know
if... Well, this could stop the whole thing, couldn't it?
metal and straw. It's not really
But
being
the
used
metal
to.
isn't going to be cold.
And yeah, probably not. So, 'cause
The
it's
metal
not really
isn't-
exposed.
The metal's not exposed. I would be
Insulated.
worried about it
Doesn't.
coming that way,
Yeah.
but it's not exposed.
Should be okay.
I think we're going to keep on.
So, the build presses on. A quick shave and a spray with insecticide, and in 4 days, this house has walls.
Well, it's quite wonderful inside. Suddenly, it's a building. This, I think, is the guest bed. And up there is Sarah and Jeremy's bedroom. It's actually very, very quiet in here. The sound deadening property is fantastic. And the straw is really densely packed. You can you can certainly tell that it's a straw bale house, can't you?
One of the things which we have been a bit concerned about is the issue of arson.
Right.
One of the reasons being that we had an arson attack on the site, and
Did
you can
you?
see the remains of the soot
Over there.
which resulted
What
from
did
it
they
over
set?
there.
Did they set fire to bales, or what did they?
There
they try
were
and
a
do?
few bales lying around the site at that time,
Right.
but the whole building's basically going to be clad in a sort of corrugated iron. It's a galvanised steel, wriggly tin, we call it. Like you might imagine a sort of Australian shack to look like. Yeah.
But originally, I thought the whole building was going to get covered in clear polycarbonate, wasn't it?
Due to a technical problem with being too close to the boundary wall on this side of the site, we had to change the cladding, and steel is more incombustible than polycarbonate.
Yeah. So basically, the inspector said you can't put it up because it's too flammable, essentially.
Basically,
yeah.
Sarah's now living in a caravan on site, with Jeremy joining her when he's down from Sheffield at weekends. They were due to move into the straw house last month, but Sarah doubts they'll be in for another 6 months.
Do you think that you have bitten off more than you could chew? There's danger, you might not pull it off.
Absolutely. No, there's always been that danger.
But I think, bits of it are more dangerous than others, so to speak. I personally feel that, there may be problems with the straw bale construction, for instance. When we monitor it, we could find that in 10, 15 years' time, we have a bunch of compost there rather than a dry bale wall, But that's a risk that we're prepared to take. We've weighed up, and that's fine. And if we have to replace that wall, we have to do that. But, without trying it, you'll never know. And that's why I think, in a way, this project could only happen with us as architects and clients.
Jeremy and Sarah came up with a system of trusses to secure their straw bales. Back home in Somerset, I'm trying out a different system for my much smaller straw building. First, we put together a timber frame. It's bolted together and sits on top of the concrete pads, which means there's no need to dig expensive foundations. The straw bales sit on this frame. They're like big bricks, and the walls go up incredibly fast. I'd say a dozen times faster than a conventional brick wall. They're £1.50 a piece, and they provide instant insulation. Plus, they're environmentally friendly because you're recycling an agricultural byproduct. To fix them together, we use hazel rods coppiced from the nearby field, which have their points sharpened and are driven into the bales like big wooden nails. It takes us 1 day to put up the frame and the straw walls, plus a little annex for the kids.
I can really now begin to see the appeal of self-build. It is remarkably satisfying at the end of the day to stand back and look at the fruits of your labour.
I'm pretty taken with straw bale building, but could a real pro be won over?
So what do you think about the straw bales then, Steve?
Oh, I think they're brilliant.
They work, do they, as a building material?
Yeah, yeah, it's been proved.
Have you used them before?
I've never have done.
So will you use them again?
Well, who knows? I might do, yeah. If we get more work from it, yeah.
Yeah, and what about the student labour that you had, the architectural students? Were they any cop? Were they...
They were very keen, but they didn't last long. Only lasted a couple of days.
Oh, right, when you were doing...
Then we lost them.
Right.
They put out the white flag after a couple of days, so...
So you had to
we had to carry it.
You had to carry it on.
Crew, yeah, and we finished it off for them.
What's the next big step?
There's all the steel work. The cranes are coming in tomorrow.
How long will that take to put up?
I'm not sure exactly.
Because you've got very, very accurate measurements, haven't you, to follow? You've got this this line here, which is the...
Yeah, all these lines are done with a laser beam, so they're all spot on.
So it should be absolutely no problem at all.
It should be a breeze.
You'll just stand back,
be a breeze.
cup of tea,
That's right.
watch it happen, won't you?
That's right, hopefully. I don't get a lot of time for standing about.
No, I know you don't.
Well, the crane came, but it wasn't a breeze. Nothing ever is in Islington.
The springs went on, and then incredibly quickly, we were just sort of out to lunch, and we came back, and the steel was here. And the steel just sort of slipped on like a stealth bomber and then went away again. We expected the next day, then we'd see the roof go on, but for some reason, the steelwork contract which we're trying to sort out, has somewhat slowed down.
While the build in Islington grinds to a halt, we set about finishing my straw studio. The weight of the frame has stiffened up the straw walls beautifully. A lime render is pushed through wire mesh on the outside, and this will protect the straw from the weather, making it waterproof. When it's plastered on the inside, the straw will be completely hidden from view, but you'll be reminded it's there by the undulating shape of the wall. Reclaimed tiles go on the roof at the back, and at the front, a leaky hose to water the turf roof. This isn't grass, but a variety of herbs and sedums held together in compost matting. Finally, building paper holds the insulation that goes under the floor. But just as we're finishing, news comes from Islington. 6 months after it was originally due on site, the steel is going up. This is Jeremy and Sarah's moment of truth. If it works, they'll finally have a building to play with, instead of just ideas. From the outset, Jeremy and Sarah have been determined to use a dizzying variety of materials on this build. Steel, stone, glass, straw, timber, and they've had to invent ways of using them as they've gone along. Add to that the fact that neither of them have built anything like this before, despite being architects. And you can see how this build was always going to be somewhat open-ended. It's now June, almost a year since we first met. So I'm wondering, have they broken the back of this project? Or will they still be looking at it from their caravan window next millennium? It's very big, isn't it?
Yes.
It is.
It's kind of...
It's vast. And this took how long to put up, the steel?
Each bit took about 2 days. So the house was 2 days, the office was 2 days, and the tower was 2 days. So suddenly, from nothing, you kind of have a building.
Wow. Come show me these springs.
Yeah.
Are they working?
We think so. We were up on the office, and it's damped it out. But we're slightly worried about this one, because the force is coming down at an angle, and you can see it's going a bit squishy over there. So it doesn't look... It actually looks wrong, doesn't it? And if things look wrong, they often are. And if you can imagine, if you've got a thing going like that, a thing going like that, and a thing going like, you know, like that, to get a bolt so that it goes straight through is somewhat of a problem. It's very, very expensive Meccano, but I almost wept when I saw it. It's heroic, I love it.
And how much was it, this expensive Meccano?
Well, with the tower is the thing we're most proud of for value for money. This is £9,000. Maybe that sounds a lot of money, but I think it's £9,000 of just wonderful.
So how do you get to the top of the tower then? There's a staircase going up?
Staircase, but we haven't got the money to put it in at the moment. So we're going to have a huge chimney instead.
The cladding is going on the bedroom wing, with a mesh guard against rodents at the bottom. They're leaving one transparent section to reveal the straw. That's all that's left of their original idea of a hairy straw building. The rest is clad with sleek tin. This is your bedroom?
It is. Bed goes here.
Uh-huh. And the view is of...
The deck.
Yeah.
As you're lying in bed.
The model, the finished house.
It is.
It's just here.
It looks really expectant, doesn't it?
Yes, waiting to be inflated, waiting for its dad
waiting for its big daddy to arrive.
Yeah. When is it going to be done?
It's going to be done by...
Oh, pick a date, go on.
March the 1st.
It's not that bonkers. I mean, OK, it's over budget, but it's probably 5% over budget. It's not bonkers over budget.
That's very good.
It is late, but not 7 weeks late in a year and a bit contract is not impossibly bad. And it's been stressful, but not suicidal.
How much do you think it's going to be worth on the open market when it's finished? At today's prices, because when it's finished, it may not be for some time.
Honestly, I think it's anywhere between a kind of negative equity. It's probably zero, i.e. completely unsellable. Or else someone will just walk in the door and say, I'll give you £2 million for it. I mean, you just do not know.
Is there a danger that it won't be completed?
There is still a danger that it won't be, yeah.
Not fully. I think it would keep on unfolding.
Also, in some ways, I'm actually quite glad that we're not entirely finishing this thing, because I have always seen this house as something of a plaything for us as architects. We are going to keep having to work on this building and keep thinking about it, keep changing it, building new bits. You know, like the library stairs suddenly are going to come up for grabs again, and we're going to have to redesign that to make it fit a new budget and blah, blah, blah. And maybe it'll be done in 5 years' time and we'll feel completely differently about what it should look like. And I really like that. I think that'll be great.
An adventure.
Yeah, keep playing around.
As Jeremy and Sarah admit, this is an extremely experimental project. It's a wacky building, and the route they've chosen to follow isn't fast or cheap or efficient. In fact, I'd say it has been, and still is, a fairly hair-raising adventure for them. And a brave one, too, because they're risking their money, they're risking their livelihood, their reputations here. But that doesn't stop them from playing with ideas. And why not? They're free to do it here, unfettered by clients.
And it's nice to see a pair of architects not afraid to have a go and make something so different. It makes me wonder if all architects haven't got something like this inside them.
I only hope Sarah's nightmare of a rusting steel skeleton doesn't come true, and that this isn't one of those architects' fantasies that's only ever finished in their heads. Jeremy and Sarah's experiment has cost £150,000 so far, and they've another £250,000 to go. My own little experiment in Somerset has cost me £8,000, which I think is pretty cheap. And it's taken me 5 weeks to build it. It's been much harder work than I expected, but now I do have a straw bale studio.
It's almost finished. We've got the plaster on, we've painted it, it's glazed, it's secure, it's very cosy. We've got really thick walls on this side, which are the straw bales, and over there. We've got a roof which is this deep, full of insulation, and the floor, which is off the deck, well above the concrete, has packed with insulation as well. So it's really going to be warm in winter and cool in summer. And that's helped by the fact that we've got the grass roof, which projects a good metre in front of the house, and that gives us lots of shade in summer. But in winter, when the sun is lower, you get lots of more direct sunlight heating the room, giving you solar gain, passive solar heating. And that's helped by the fact that the glass is Pilkington K, which has this infrared coating which keeps the heat in the room. So I shall hardly need to use the wood burner, I hope. Because we're using straw on one side and stone on the other, the place has this kind of great sort of massive quality. It's using local materials, literally dug out of the fields or chopped out of the fields to make it. And that's further emphasised by these great oak frames, and these are deliberately large. I wanted them to be really chunky and not quite agricultural, but certainly rural. And the oak is also cut into the stone around the frame, so it sort of contours and fits it like a glove, so that there's a relationship, if you like, between the stone and the oak. All in all, it should be really cheap to heat. It's really cosy, very, very quiet, has fabulous views, and I can come here and lose myself in my little cocoon. Straw bale building is still in its infancy. It's still experimental. But when it's all finished, when it's rendered, when it's plastered out, it's really solid. It makes a really good wall. So I'm sure it does have a future. One thing I've learned, though, both here and watching them, if you're going to experiment with the building, do it on a small scale.